They say middle children are invisible. I used to think that was just a joke until I lived it. I'm Claire, 38, and this is the story of how my own family forgot I existed. Until I made them remember. Last Christmas, after a lifetime of silence, I finally spoke up. And what came out shocked everyone. You see, they thought I was the failure, the quiet one, the burden. But they didn't know I was also the one who'd been keeping them afloat for years. And when my mother called me the most useless child she had, I gave them the truth, all of it. Growing up as the middle child in the Harper family felt like trying to sing in a room full of screaming voices. No matter how loud you tried, nobody ever really heard you. My name is Claire Harper. I'm 38 now, and I've spent most of my life trying to earn the kind of attention my siblings seem to receive without even trying. My older brother Greg was always the golden boy. He was the child who made straight A's, the one who memorized the periodic table in 5th grade just for fun. Naturally, he became a doctor, and our mother Helen couldn't be prouder. She never missed a chance to tell dinner guests how Greg once won the regional science fair in 8th grade. And somehow that story still found its way into conversations well into our 30s. Then there was Alison, our youngest. She had this effortless charm that made everyone around her soften. Even when she was clearly being manipulative as a kid, people just laughed and called her clever. She went on to become a successful lawyer, and I swear my mother talks about her like she's the second coming of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then there was me. I work in marketing. I love it, honestly. There's something exhilarating about crafting a campaign that speaks to people, something satisfying about the blend of strategy and creativity. But to my mother, it's always just been Claire's little job. That's what she calls it, even now. Her tone dipped in that special kind of disdain only a mother can manage. Still doing your little job, she'd say, like I was flipping burgers on the corner instead of leading national campaigns for one of the top agencies in Chicago. But the disregard didn't start in adulthood. It started young, quiet, constant, and cumulative. I remember one birthday when I was turning 10. I had made my own cupcakes, chocolate with cream cheese frosting, because I wanted to surprise everyone. I cleaned up the kitchen, set up decorations in the dining room, and waited. Greg had just gotten his learner's permit and pulled into the driveway with Mom in the passenger seat, beaming with pride. "Did you see how smoothly he parked?" she gushed to my dad, not even noticing the effort I had put into the day. When I brought out the cupcakes, she said, "You should have waited, Claire. Now they're melting." Another time, I stayed up all night helping with laundry before one of our big family reunions. I was maybe 15. I folded everyone's clothes, even ironed Greg's shirts, and helped Alison pick out a matching outfit. The next morning, Mum came downstairs and said, "Alison, you look adorable. Greg, thank you for setting the table." She glanced at me and said nothing, not even a nod, just walked past me like I was air. Those weren't isolated incidents. They were patterns. Little moments that stitched themselves together into a thread I could never quite break. I tried harder. I brought home straight A's too. I joined the student council, worked at a local art gallery, volunteered to help with church events. Every time I hoped it might be enough to earn something, a smile, a compliment, anything, but all I ever got was a "That's nice, dear," followed quickly by Greg just got into another honours programme, or Alison was just elected class president, you might think I'm bitter. And maybe I was for a long time, but mostly I was just tired of trying to prove I belonged, tired of chasing affection that felt conditional and impossible to catch. There's a special kind of loneliness in being surrounded by family who never really sees you. Now, at 38, I've built a life of my own, a good life. But no matter how far I've come, that thread, that invisible, unbreakable string that kept pulling me back into the same dynamics, still tugs at my sleeve. And this Christmas, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would finally snap. There was one moment, just one, that used to give me a flicker of hope. I was in 11th grade and we had to write personal essays for our English class. I poured myself into mine, writing about how it felt to be the middle child, how I often felt like the pause in a sentence, neither the beginning nor the end. It was raw and honest, more than I'd ever written before. I remember the teacher called home that week to tell my parents how powerful my essay was. I didn't know until dinner that night. Mum set the table like always, then sat down and said, "Mrs. Langley called today." I held my breath. "She said your essay was beautifully written," Mum continued. For a second, just a second, my heart swelled. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment she'd finally see me. She looked up from her plate and smiled. I was surprised, honestly. "You've never been much of a writer." I sank but stayed quiet. Then she turned to Greg. "Did you get your chem test back yet?" "Yeah, 98, he said casually. Her eyes lit up. "That's my boy. I told you all that studying would pay off." I didn't say another word that night, and I never brought up the essay again. Years passed. That moment faded, but it never left completely. It became symbolic of every almost moment I'd had with her, where praise was dangled but always snatched away by comparison. But here's what's different now. I'm 38, and I just got promoted to senior marketing strategist at a firm I've worked at for 10 years. It wasn't handed to me. I earned every bit of it. Late nights, early mornings, difficult clients, high-stakes presentations, and last month Daniel proposed. It happened on a crisp October weekend, surrounded by fall leaves in a quiet corner of Wisconsin. We were hiking, just the two of us, and he pulled out a ring at the overlook. I said yes before he could even finish asking. Daniel is everything, steady, gentle, funny in a dry, surprising way. He doesn't make grand gestures, he makes consistent ones. He remembers how I take my coffee, leaves me notes before big meetings, and listens, really listens when I talk about the things I care about. He's the first person who made me feel seen without me having to work for it. And so this Christmas, I'm carrying a little velvet box in my purse. I haven't told anyone yet, not even my closest friends. I wanted my family to hear it from me in person. Part of me still hoped this news might be the thing that finally made them proud. Silly, maybe. But even after all this time, there's still that tiny flicker inside me that wants to believe things can change, that this holiday might be different, that when I say I got promoted or I'm engaged, they'll smile for real and not just out of politeness, that I won't be met with indifference or a quick pivot back to Greg's medical achievements or Alison's latest courtroom win. As I packed for the trip home, I wrapped each gift carefully, personalised ones, like always. I spent weeks thinking about what each person would love, not what was flashy or expensive, but what would make them feel understood, That's who I am. That's always been who I am. Daniel offered to come with me, but I told him no. He's spending the holidays with his parents in Oregon, and we'd agreed we'd do something together when he got back. I wanted to go alone this time, to face whatever was waiting for me, with the quiet confidence that I wasn't walking in as the forgotten middle child anymore. I was walking in as a woman who had built something real. I zipped up my suitcase, checked my purse for the ring box one more time, and whispered to myself, no matter what happens, I'm enough. Snow was already falling when I pulled into my childhood driveway on Christmas morning. The same cracked pavement curved up toward the familiar two-story colonial, its shutters now a little faded, but the house still stubbornly proud. My breath clouded in the cold air as I stepped out, arms full of carefully wrapped gifts. Each package had been labelled with meticulous care, my handwriting neat, the ribbon colours matched to each recipient's favourite shade. The front door swung open before I even reached the porch. "Claire!" my father called out, his voice warm, his arms wide. He was still wearing his flannel pyjamas and house slippers, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand. He hugged me tightly, smelling like cinnamon and aftershave. "Glad you're home, sweetheart." "Good to see you, Dad," I said, and I meant it. He was always the softer one between him and my mother, quieter, more observant. He stepped aside so I could enter, and I crossed the threshold into the house that never quite felt like mine. The decorations were exactly the same as every year. The same ceramic angel perched on the mantel, the same string of coloured lights blinking above the bay window, and the same family photos from decades ago lining the staircase. Greg's graduation, Alison's piano recital, my awkward middle school portrait tucked in the corner. And there she was, Helen Harper, my mother, standing in the kitchen archway wearing the red cashmere cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. She barely looked up from stirring a pot on the stove. "You're late," she said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "I told everyone to be here by 9:30. "It's 9:42, I said. There was traffic. She gave me that tight smile that always made me feel 12 years old again. "Well, Greg and Alison managed to make it on time." I glanced into the living room and saw them there. Greg in a designer sweater, Alison in a sharp navy dress, already sipping coffee and laughing with Grandma Ruth. Greg looked up and nodded. "Hey, Claire," he said. Alison gave a little wave. "Cute coat," she said, though I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a jab. "Put your things down," Mum said briskly. "You can help with the potatoes. And don't forget to baste the turkey in 10 minutes. Of course. I dropped my purse and the gift bags in the corner and tied an apron around my waist. While I chopped, stirred and prepped, I watched as Greg recounted some story about a difficult surgery, complete with dramatic pauses and medical jargon that made everyone gasp in admiration. Alison followed with an update about a recent case she'd won, pro bono, of course, just to show how altruistic she was. I didn't mind helping, not really, but it was the assumption that I'd do it all. The way it never occurred to anyone that maybe I too had stories worth telling, or hands that deserved a break. When it was finally time to exchange gifts, everyone gathered in the living room. The fireplace crackled, candles flickered. The tree sparkled with ornaments from every phase of our childhoods. Greg went first, presenting our parents with a new espresso machine, sleek, expensive chrome. "For your mornings," he said, "you deserve to start the day right." "Oh, Gregory," Mum beamed. It's perfect. Just perfect. Alison followed, handing over an envelope. Weekend getaway. All expenses paid. I booked you two at that spa you loved in Vermont. Mum clutched her chest, like she'd just been proposed to. You remembered. Oh, honey, this is too much. Then it was my turn. I handed Mum a small box. Inside was a hand-bound book of family recipes. I'd spent weeks collecting them, digitising photos of Grandma's handwritten notes, formatting them, printing and binding the collection. Each recipe included a little anecdote, like how Mum always burned the first batch of cookies, or how Greg used to sneak spoonfuls of frosting behind her back. She opened it slowly, flipped through a few pages. Oh, she said, how thoughtful, I smiled. I thought you'd like something personal this year. She murmured, already turning her head. Alison, I have to show you that new coat I got from Macy's. It's in the bedroom. Come help me pick shoes for dinner. Just like that. My gift was closed and set aside like a catalogue she didn't ask for. I sat there quietly, while everyone marvelled over Greg's gadget and Alison's spa trip. I reached for my cup of tea, hands shaking only slightly, reminding myself, it's fine. This is nothing new. This is how it's always been. But deep inside, that invisible thread pulled a little tighter. The one that connected me to this place, not through love, but through expectation, through silence. Through a kind of loyalty I was beginning to question. Daniel's words echoed in my head. You don't need to earn their love. You're already worthy. I touched the velvet ring box in my purse. Still unopened. Still waiting. By mid-afternoon, I had finally slipped away from the bustle in the kitchen. The table was set, the turkey was resting, and everyone else had scattered to different corners of the house. I went upstairs to my old bedroom, now half storage room, half guest room. It still smelled faintly like the lavender sachets Mum used to tuck into drawers, though the posters had been taken down and replaced with a plain beige wall. I needed a moment to breathe, to centre myself. My hand drifted to the velvet ring box inside my purse. I held it there, thumb brushing the smooth surface, imagining how it would feel to finally tell them. I pictured my mother's face, softening with genuine pride. I imagined her standing to hug me. I imagined my siblings offering more than polite smiles. I was still holding that tiny daydream in my chest when I heard her voice, muffled but unmistakably my mother's, coming from the hallway. She was on the phone. Yes, Greg just got that award from the medical board, she said, her voice bright, proud. And Alison's firm is already talking about making her a senior partner by next year. Can you believe it? A pause. Then the words that knocked the breath out of me. Well, Claire's here, too, she said, and chuckled lightly. Still doing that, whatever it is, marketing job. She hasn't really done anything noteworthy yet, but she means well. I froze. My skin prickled. My ears rang. I stood there rigid, listening to my mother reduce my life to a polite shrug, to a joke, as if the promotions, the long hours, the team I led, the clients I'd secured, none of it mattered, not to her, not enough. My fingers clenched around the velvet box. I backed away slowly, quietly, returning to my room. The tears came fast, hot and silent. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the pale carpet, letting the words echo again and again in my head. She hasn't really done anything noteworthy yet. After everything, after years of trying, after carrying this family on my back in ways she didn't even know. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the ring across the room. I wanted to run back to the city and never come back. Instead, I reached for my phone. Daniel had texted an hour ago. "How's it going?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "She still thinks I'm nothing. She said I haven't done anything noteworthy." He responded almost instantly. "That's not true. You've built a whole life. You've built a career. You've supported people who didn't deserve your help, and now you're starting your own chapter with me." I hesitated. Then another message appeared. "Don't let her write your story. You tell it. Start now." I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. He was right. He always knew what to say, but more importantly, he always believed what he said. I looked in the mirror. My mascara was a little smudged, but I didn't fix it. I just stood taller. I wasn't the invisible girl in this house anymore. Downstairs, the voices were gathering again. Silverware clinked against china. Laughter drifted from the dining room, my cue. I slid the ring box into my coat pocket, straightened my shoulders, and walked down the stairs like I belonged there, because I did. The dining room table was full, 12 people, everyone in their usual places. My seat, of course, was between my youngest cousin and the empty chair no one ever filled since Grandpa passed away. As we passed around the food, I nodded and smiled, but didn't speak much. I was waiting. Timing mattered. This story, my story, needed the right moment. My mother lifted her wine glass. "To family," she said, as always. Everyone echoed her, then I cleared my throat. "I have something to share," I said. All eyes turned to me. The air thickened. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the ring box, and opened it in front of them. "I'm engaged," I said, loud and clear. "Daniel proposed last month. I said yes." There was a pause, long enough to register, long enough for every set of eyes to blink. Then my father's face lit up. "Claire, that's wonderful," he said. Grandma Ruth gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh, darling, congratulations." A few murmured congratulations followed. Greg smiled politely. Alison looked mildly surprised. "But my mother?" Her lips parted slightly. "In October?" she asked, voice sharp. "And you're just now telling us?" "I wanted to do it in person," I replied. "I thought it would be more special this way." She nodded slowly, setting down her fork. "Well," she said in a tone that chilled the room. "That's just like you. Always keeping things to yourself." I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Not this time." The ring sat in its open box, glinting under the chandelier's warm glow, yet the silence around the table was almost comical. For a brief, fragile moment, I thought maybe it was shock. Maybe they were all just processing the news. Then finally, Dad broke the silence. "Claire, that's wonderful news," he said with genuine warmth, lifting his wine glass in a modest toast. "Daniel's a good man. You two make a great team." Grandma Ruth clapped lightly and leaned over to touch my hand. "About time he asked. I always knew he was smart." Aunt Martha nodded, smiling vaguely. A few cousins murmured a polite "congrats." Greg gave me a thumbs up while chewing a piece of turkey, and then, predictably, Mom cleared her throat. She didn't look at me. She looked at her plate as she said, "Well, I suppose teaching high school is a respectable job, though it doesn't exactly have much upward trajectory." I felt my stomach turn. Greg set down his fork. Alison took a sip of wine and avoided eye contact. I forced a smile. Daniel loves teaching. He's passionate about it. His students respect him, and he makes a real difference. That's nice, Mum replied, as if I'd just said he made balloon animals at birthday parties. At least he's not unemployed. The tension at the table grew thicker with every passing second, but no one intervened. I glanced at Greg, hoping he might speak up, might say, "Hey, that's enough," but he just stared at the centerpiece, his jaw tightening slightly, still chewing, still silent. I cleared my throat again. And I was also promoted last month, senior marketing strategist. I'll be leading a team. Oh, Mum said, finally glancing up. Is that good? I never really understood what you do exactly. Isn't it just, picking colours and writing slogans? A few uncomfortable chuckles rose around the table. I felt heat creep up my neck, but I kept my tone even. It's a bit more than that. We handle market analysis, client strategy, content development, digital positioning. It's a leadership role, and it came with a significant raise. Mum raised her eyebrows slightly. Well, it's no medical degree or law practice, but if it makes you happy. Another wave of tension rolled across the table. I waited for someone, anyone, to redirect the conversation, to show the slightest enthusiasm, but Greg just shifted in his chair. Alison checked her phone under the table. The silence was louder than any insult. Then Mum spoke again, almost casually, as if we were discussing the weather. It's funny, out of all three of you, I always thought Greg would be the success story and Alison the go-getter. And you, Claire, well, you've always sort of meandered. I blinked. Excuse me? She smiled as if she hadn't just punched the air from my lungs. I'm just saying you've always taken the scenic route, and that's okay. Some people bloom later than others. The air around me felt thin. My hands clenched under the table. I looked around, waiting again, begging silently for someone to challenge her. No one did, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Mom. It was about all of them. They'd accepted this version of me for so long that I was the unremarkable one, the helper, the background character, that they didn't even question it anymore. They had folded me into this narrative where Greg was the hero, Alison the prodigy, and I was filler. I looked at Greg. He was staring down at his plate, not meeting my eyes. "Greg," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "do you agree with her?" He blinked and looked up, startled. "What? Do you think I am the least accomplished of the three of us?" "I didn't say that," he muttered. "But do you think it?" He hesitated. That was the worst part. He actually hesitated. Then he said, "You've made different choices, Claire." Different. Not worse, not better, just different. The most non-committal, dismissive answer he could give. I turned to Alison. "And you, got anything to say?" She looked genuinely surprised, as if she hadn't expected to be addressed. "Look, Claire, this is just how Mom is. She doesn't mean anything by it." She said, "I'm the least accomplished child she has. That's not nothing." Alison shrugged. "She says worse things about me when I'm not here. Don't take it so personally." I felt the burn rise in my chest. All those years of being the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the one who never made a scene, it all boiled up at once. But I wasn't going to explode, not yet. Instead, I closed the ring box gently and placed it beside my plate. Then I folded my hands and said, calmly, I thought maybe this year would be different. I thought I'd be seen. Greg looked away again. That was the second betrayal, the quiet kind. The one where you expect someone to stand beside you and they vanish instead. I sat back and watched the faces around the table return to their plates, to their drinks, to their conversations, leaving me in that familiar, hollow place. And in that moment, I realised something painful and clear. The only person in that room who truly saw me wasn't even there. The silence at the table felt like a second skin. Everyone was pretending to chew, to drink, to be occupied with anything except the fact that my mother had just declared me the least accomplished of her children, and no one had pushed back. The air vibrated with tension, but no one broke it, no one but me. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor, making heads jerk up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. If I'm the least accomplished, I began, my voice steady, then why is it that this entire family leans on me when things fall apart? A few forks paused mid-air. Eyes widened, but no one spoke. I paid for Dad's physical therapy when the insurance wouldn't cover it. I covered Alison's bar exam fees when her trust fund ran dry. And Greg? Remember when your loans almost defaulted because your practice wasn't profitable yet? His head snapped up. Yeah, I said, with an edge that even surprised me. That was me, quiet little Claire, covering for all of you. And not once has anyone acknowledged it. The table was still. Twist the knife, Claire. You want to call my job just marketing, Mom? Fine. But that little job is what paid for Christmas last year when your credit cards were maxed out. I wired money to your account 2 days before Christmas Eve. Still nothing, and then I saw it. Alison, she was smirking, not an amused smirk, not a sympathetic one. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A flicker of something satisfied, like she had been waiting for this. For me to snap. For me to play the role I was always told not to. Dramatic, reactive, unstable. That was the twist I hadn't expected. It wasn't just Mom who believed I was a disappointment. Alison did too. She had been soaking in my unravelling drop by drop. I turned to her. What are you smiling at? She blinked. Nothing, I've never seen you stand up for yourself like this. The sarcasm in her voice was a blade. Oh, so now it's funny, I said. All these years while you strutted around with Mom singing your praises, I was the one bailing you out behind the scenes. That's not fair, she shot back, lips tightening. No, I replied. What's not fair is spending decades trying to prove I matter to a family that treats me like a supporting character in your lives. Greg finally spoke, his voice low. Claire, maybe this isn't the time. No, Greg, this is exactly the time, I said. Because every other time I've stayed silent, hoping one of you would speak up. But you never did. You just let it happen. My mother set down her wine glass a little too hard. Claire, that's enough. No, it's not, I said, locking eyes with her. I've spent my entire life trying to be enough for you, for this family. I bent over backwards. I worked hard. I showed up. I paid the bills when no one else could. And still, I'm the one who gets dismissed, mocked, forgotten. Don't be so dramatic, she said coolly. I stepped forward, my voice cold as winter steel. If I'm so useless, Mom, I said, then how has this family survived? Nobody breathed. If I'm the least accomplished, I continued, then how come I've been the one quietly holding it all together? Grandma Ruth covered her mouth. Dad looked stunned. And for the first time ever, I watched my mother blink like she had no script to follow. Like she couldn't quite process that the child she thought would always stay small had suddenly grown a spine right at the dinner table. Greg looked down again. Alison crossed her arms. I looked around at all of them, my family, and realised something even more devastating than their silence. They hadn't just allowed this dynamic to fester, they had depended on it. I was their buffer, their backup plan, their built-in caregiver, and now I was breaking rank. "Claire," Mom said, a warning in her tone. I shook my head. "No more. If this family needs a punching bag, you'll have to find someone else. I'm done being the afterthought. I'm done being the footnote in a story I've helped write from the shadows." I sat back down, pulse still racing, and the room, once so full of cheerful noise, sat in a stunned, unbearable stillness. The silence had teeth now, sharp ones. No one moved, no one reached for their wine, no one cleared their throat in polite transition. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, the faint creak of the radiator kicking in. And in that moment I realised the truth was ready to surface. Raw, cold, and undeniable. I pulled my phone from my purse and tapped open my banking app. "If no one's going to say it," I said, "then I will." Mum furrowed her brow. "Claire, what are you doing?" "I'm opening the ledger," I replied. "The what?" I held the screen up. "Let's talk numbers, since that seems to be the only thing that counts around here." I scrolled and read aloud, my voice calm but cutting. January 5th, 2020, $2,400 to Mercy General Hospital, Dad's post-op rehab. March 12th, 2021, $1,700 to Alison Harper for bar prep expenses. July 8th, 2021, $3,200 to Greg Harper, credit card debt. I kept going. November 3rd, 2021, $800 to Mom, house utilities. April 22nd, 2022, $2,500 to Dad again for physical therapy after the fall. June 10th, 2022, $1,000 to Greg, student loan interest payment. Everyone sat like statues. Even Grandma Ruth looked stunned, her mouth slightly open. I flipped the screen around. "Would anyone like to dispute these? I have receipts for every transaction." Alison was pale. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I did," I replied. "You just didn't hear me, because it didn't fit the version of me you all had locked in your heads." Greg cleared his throat. "Claire, I thought Mum and Dad helped with my credit card stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "No, Greg. Mum asked me to help, said it would embarrass you if anyone else found out, so I covered it and stayed quiet. Like I always do." I turned back to my mother. "Does this ring a bell?" Her eyes were wide, but her mouth remained a thin, pursed line. "I didn't think you'd keep track," she said softly. "That's the thing," I said. "When you're constantly trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, you keep track of everything." I placed the phone down gently in front of me. "I call it the cost of admission," I said, "the price of being your daughter. Because apparently love in this house is a subscription model and my dues are always due." "Claire, stop," Mum said, her voice rising slightly. "No," I said, "I'm not done." I looked around the table at every stunned, silent face. I wasn't keeping score because I wanted payback. I kept track because I needed to remind myself that I was doing something, that I was contributing, because clearly no one else ever noticed. Dad finally spoke, his voice low and full of something I hadn't heard before. Guilt. "Claire, I didn't know. Your mother never told me." "She told me not to. I said, not even looking at her. Said it would complicate things. Alison looked down. Greg ran a hand through his hair, still processing. I leaned forward, tone calm but final. I'm not bringing this up to shame anyone, I said. I'm saying it because I'm done carrying the weight of this family without acknowledgement. I'm done being your financial backup plan, your emotional dumping ground, and your default scapegoat. I sat back. And you know what's wild? I never minded helping. I actually felt good about it at first, like maybe, just maybe, you'd see that I wasn't the failure, that I had value. But now I realise, even if I'd paid off everyone's mortgages, you still would have looked at me like I was behind. The room stayed quiet, but now it wasn't denial I saw on their faces. It was shame, real, simmering shame. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't the one carrying it. For a long moment, no one said a word. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, in my temples, in the tips of my fingers. All the noise in the house, the chatter, the clinking glasses, the scrape of silverware had died. The silence wasn't just awkward now. It was thick with consequence. Then, unexpectedly, a voice broke through. "Good for you," Grandma Ruth said, her voice clear, strong. All heads turned toward the end of the table, where she sat with perfect posture and piercing eyes. "I always knew you were the one carrying more than your share, Claire," she continued. "I just didn't know the numbers, but I knew." I stared at her. She had always been kind, but quiet. Never confrontational, never stepping between my mother and her sharp tongue. I'd always assumed she chose not to see. That maybe it was easier, generational, expected. "I saw it," she said again, firmer now, but I didn't speak up. Because, truth be told, I was afraid of her. She turned her gaze to my mother, whose jaw tightened. "That's right, Helen. I've been afraid of you since you were old enough to throw a look that could slice bread. You've always been intense, controlling, and most of us tiptoed around you for the sake of peace." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Mother, this is not the time." "No, it is," Grandma Ruth interrupted. "Because Claire just did what the rest of us should have done years ago. She told the truth." Twist after twist landed like small earthquakes around the table. My mother, normally composed, dismissive, untouchable, was visibly rattled. And then came the final blow I hadn't expected. My father cleared his throat. "Claire," he said slowly, "I need to admit something too." He didn't look at me when he spoke. He stared at his plate as if the words would burn if he said them too directly. "Your mother told me not to tell you about the money, about the help. She said it would mess with your confidence and that it was better if you just thought of it as your duty." I blinked. "You knew?" "I didn't know all of it," he said quickly. "I knew some. She would come to me after the fact and say, 'Claire's helping with this,' or 'Claire offered to cover that.' I thought it was your idea. I thought you didn't mind." "I didn't mind," I said, "until it became the only thing anyone expected of me." He finally looked up. There was pain in his eyes, guilt, real and raw. "I should have said something. I should have stopped it." My mother, now fully exposed, tried to reclaim control. "Well, families help each other," she said briskly, her tone more brittle than ever. "That's what families do. We all chip in. That's not a crime." "No," I said, my voice cold and calm. "Helping isn't a crime. But demanding without gratitude is. Taking without acknowledgement is. Pretending I'm the least successful while depending on me for financial survival. That's cruel." She stiffened. You're twisting this, I leaned in. No, Mum, I'm untwisting it. I'm straightening out the lies this family's been tangled in for years. The air was razor sharp. I've done everything you said makes a person valuable. I worked hard, I stayed quiet, I showed up, I gave and gave and gave, hoping one day you'd look at me the way you look at Greg, the way you brag about Alison. I paused, watching her face harden. But you never did, and you know why? Her silence dared me to finish. Because you never saw me as part of this family. Not really, I was a utility, a fallback, a safety net. That's not true, she said, voice cracking. It is, I whispered, because not once have you ever called me when it wasn't about needing something. Not once have you said, I'm proud of you, without following it up with a comparison. Not once have you simply loved me, just because I'm your daughter. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, and then I said the line that had been sitting on my tongue for years. You say families help each other, but you've never treated me like family. That landed, that shattered the final veneer. My mother blinked fast, as if dust had gotten in her eyes, but there was no dust in that room, only truth. And it was everywhere now, on the table, in our wine glasses, between the uneaten green beans and mashed potatoes. The ledger wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Decades of imbalance, now fully visible. Grandma Ruth raised her glass. To Claire, the backbone no one thanked. And for once, the room raised their glasses not out of habit, not because it was expected, but because there was nothing else left to say. I didn't storm out. That's what most people might have expected. That I'd slam a door or shout something final before disappearing into the snow. But I didn't need theatrics. The truth had already done enough damage. Or maybe, just maybe, it had done something closer to healing. I stood, pushed my chair in, and picked up my coat from the back of the chair. I didn't look at anyone, not Mom, not Dad, not Greg or Alison, not even Grandma Ruth, who had finally spoken up after a lifetime of silence. Just as I reached the hallway, my mother's voice followed me. Claire, please, she said, trying to sound composed, but failing. Don't make this into something bigger than it is. I turned slowly, one hand on the doorknob. It's not big, Mum, I said, smiling softly. Not anymore. She looked confused, and then I added, I've decided to live smaller, in your world. Her face froze. She opened her mouth to argue, to scold, to say something that might pull me back into her orbit. But I didn't give her the chance. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The cold slapped me in the face, and for the first time all day it felt refreshing, real. Like breathing in something that hadn't been filtered through years of expectation. The drive home was quiet. My hands trembled on the wheel, not with fear, but with release. My body felt weightless and heavy at the same time. My phone buzzed several times in the passenger seat. Mom, Dad, even Alison, but I didn't answer. I didn't owe them anything right now, maybe not ever again. When I got to my apartment, the living room lights were already on. Daniel had come back early, just like he said he would if things went south. I opened the door, and there he was. In sweatpants and a hoodie, holding a mug of tea and looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered in the world. I dropped my purse, closed the door, and collapsed into his arms. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to fix it. He just held me, one hand on the back of my head, the other around my waist, like he was holding the last piece of something fragile and precious. I'm done, I whispered into his chest. I know, he said. No more money, no more calls, no more waiting for them to love me the way I hoped they would. He pulled back just enough to look at me. Good, he said, because we're going to start fresh, from zero, you and me, no permission needed. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I've been funding their lives, I said, half laughing, half choking. I don't even have a savings account of my own. Can you believe that? Yes, he said gently, but that ends tonight. I nodded. In that moment, I wasn't just stepping away from my family. I was stepping into my life. One where I set the rules. One where love was not measured in silence and sacrifice, but in balance and reciprocity. That night, I sat down at my computer and drafted the emails to my mother, to my father, to both of my siblings. I wrote with clarity, not spite. I told them I would no longer be providing financial support of any kind, that I was not angry, but I was done, that my love could no longer be conditional on being needed, but never appreciated. I didn't send the emails that night. I let them sit in my drafts, waiting, because tomorrow I would wake up and hit send. The next morning I woke to the soft smell of coffee and the warmth of Daniel's side still pressed into mine. For a moment everything felt still, like time had taken a breath. Then I remembered the emails waiting in my drafts. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, and said, quietly, "You know I haven't had a savings account in 10 years. Daniel stirred. What? I sat up, pulling my knees to my chest. 10 years, every raise I got, every bonus, every tax return, it all went to them. Rent shortfalls, surprise bills, legal fees, medical co-pays. I just kept giving." He blinked at me, stunned. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." I laughed bitterly. I used to think, if I give enough, maybe they'll finally see me. But all I became was their invisible bank account, their safety net. Daniel didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, really looked. His eyes full of something between heartbreak and fury. "You should have told me," he said gently. I was embarrassed, I admitted. Like it made me weak somehow, like I wasn't really an adult if I couldn't say no to them. "You're the strongest person I know," he said, "but this isn't strength. This is survival, and you don't have to survive anymore." I took a deep breath. I want to start over, really over. "Then let's do it," he said, "today." So we did. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account in my name only. No shared access, no hidden beneficiaries, no one but me. The process was so simple it almost felt insulting. Like, how had I let something so basic feel so impossible for so long? When the banker handed me the folder with my name printed on it in bold black letters, Claire Harper, something shifted inside me. Not huge, just a click. But it was enough. Next, I went home, opened my laptop, and reread the emails. I edited them slightly, cut the justifications, removed the apologies. I didn't need to explain or ask for permission. I needed to inform. "Mum, I've decided to step back from the financial role I've been playing for years. This isn't an act of anger, it's an act of necessity. I need to rebuild the life I've neglected while helping hold others up. I hope you understand." Claire, I copied and pasted variations for Dad, Greg, and Alison, all direct, all final, all free of guilt. Then I hit send. One click at a time, I severed the invisible wires that had tethered me to a version of myself I no longer wanted to be. Afterward, Daniel and I sat on the couch, our legs tangled, the quiet between us warm and full. "How do you feel?" he asked. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly. Lighter. He kissed the top of my head. That's the sound of power, returning to the person it belonged to all along. I smiled into his chest. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't hoping someone would validate me or approve or even notice. I was doing this for me. That night, we made pasta, opened a bottle of wine, and talked about our future. Our real future, the one where my name wasn't a punchline, where my value wasn't measured in silence, where my generosity wasn't currency to earn proximity to people who didn't appreciate it. I told him I wanted to travel, that I'd always dreamed of visiting Florence, of seeing paintings I'd only ever studied in college from grainy textbooks. "We'll go," he said without hesitation. "And I want to go back to school," I added. "Maybe get my MBA, maybe even start my own consulting firm someday." His face lit up. Hell yes. He didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't bring up money. He didn't say it would be hard or suggest I wait. He just believed. That simple, quiet belief was more powerful than any speech, any approval, any toast I'd ever longed for from my family. I thought I would feel grief in this exile. And maybe, deep down, I did. But above all, I felt power. My power. The kind that doesn't need permission. The first call came the morning after I hit send. My phone lit up with Dad as the contact, and for a split second I hesitated, but I answered. Because he wasn't the one I was angry at, not fully. He was complicit, yes, but never cruel. "Claire," he said, just my name, like it carried the weight of everything he hadn't said over the past 10 years. "I got your email," he continued, voice rougher than usual. "I read it twice." "Okay," I said, sitting at the kitchen table, Daniel watching me quietly from across the room. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." That cracked something in me. He wasn't defensive. He didn't try to explain it away. He just admitted it. "I should have said something sooner," he added. "I should have noticed." "You could have stopped it," I said, not angrily, just factually. "I know," he whispered. "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just keeping you in pain." We talked for a few more minutes. It wasn't a full reckoning, but it was a start. Later that afternoon, Greg texted. "Can we talk?" I agreed, reluctantly. We spoke that night. His voice was low, careful. "I didn't know it was you," he said. "The loan thing, the credit card. Mum said it was covered. I thought they'd just figured it out." "You never asked," I replied. "You never once asked how it got paid. You just moved on." "You're right," he said. "I was selfish." That word, selfish. I'd never heard Greg apply it to himself before. It almost didn't fit coming from him, but I let it sit. "I want to pay you back," he added. I didn't say anything. "I mean it," he insisted. "I have the money now. It won't happen overnight, but I'll do it. Installments, whatever you want. I don't want to owe you silence anymore." It wasn't about the money anymore, but I let him have that gesture. Maybe he needed it. Maybe I did too. The next morning I got an email from Alison, not a call, not even a voice memo, just a sterile subject line regarding financial support, clarification and apology. I opened it with a sigh. It was 3 paragraphs. She acknowledged that she had relied on unspoken assistance during her bar exam period. She apologised if it felt one-sided, though the phrasing was careful, like every word had passed through a legal team. And attached to it, a PDF, an official loan agreement, drafted and signed digitally for the exact amount I'd given her, with a repayment plan over 12 months. I stared at the document, equal parts amused and exhausted. It was so Alison, formal, detached, precise, no call, no real warmth, just business. Daniel leaned over my shoulder. "Well," he said, "that's one way to say sorry." "I guess it's a lawyer's version of a hug," I muttered. "You gonna sign it?" "Maybe," I said. "Not today." I closed the email and went for a walk. The trees were bare, the wind sharp, but something about the cold felt invigorating now. Not numbing, cleansing. I walked around the block twice, phone in my pocket, resisting the urge to check it again. When I returned home, there was still no message from my mother. No call, no text, no email. The woman who used to text me every time her internet glitched, or the thermostat made a noise, had gone completely silent. Daniel noticed. "She hasn't said anything?" "Not a word." "Do you want her to?" I thought about that for a long time. "I used to," I said. "I used to imagine the perfect apology, something tearful and honest, where she'd finally admit she was wrong. And now? Now I just want her to stop taking up space in my head." He nodded, wrapping his arms around me. "She will, one day." And maybe she would. But in the meantime, the ripples had started. They weren't tidal waves. No one showed up at my door in tears, begging for forgiveness. But they were movements, shifts in the foundation. And for the first time, I wasn't the one making all the effort. 3 days passed, still no call from my mother. And then one afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox, not an email, not a voicemail. An actual handwritten envelope addressed to me in her precise, elegant script. The kind she used on Christmas cards and thank you notes. The kind I used to imitate as a kid, tracing each loop with my pencil. I stood in the kitchen staring at it, the weight of the paper strangely heavy in my hand. Daniel walked by and paused, eyeing the envelope. "From her?" he asked. I nodded. "You okay?" I wasn't sure. I nodded anyway. I opened it slowly, as if the letter might explode. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery, cream-coloured, faintly scented. She'd written in blue ink, not typed, not formal. Her actual handwriting, neat, composed, familiar. "Claire, I've been thinking about what you said, all of it. I've read your email more times than I care to admit. And I need to tell you something I never thought I would. I was the middle child too." I sat down slowly. "You probably don't remember much about your great Uncle Ray or Aunt Sylvia. They were my older and younger siblings, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, I knew I was the bridge between them. Always the one in the background, always the one asked to smooth things over. My mother used to say I was the practical one. That was her way of saying I wasn't the favourite. Ray was the golden boy, and Sylvia the baby. I was the reliable one, and I hated it. So when I had kids, I told myself I'd never play favourites. I told myself I'd raise strong children, resilient ones who didn't need praise to know they were worthy. But I see now I got it all wrong. I wiped my eyes, the ink already blurring. "Claire, I didn't see you because I was too busy protecting the version of myself I thought you'd become. I thought if I pushed you, you'd grow thicker skin, that if I didn't coddle you, you'd be stronger. I thought if I made you tough, maybe you wouldn't hurt the way I did, but you did hurt, and I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it yet. I just wanted you to know that I was never blind to your efforts. I just didn't know how to honour them without unravelling the image I had of myself. Love. Mom. I folded the letter carefully, setting it down like it was made of glass. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was waiting for anger or relief, but because I didn't know what to feel. This was the most honest thing my mother had ever said to me. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't poetic, but it was real. Daniel came back into the room and sat across from me. You read it? I nodded. And? I cried, I said honestly, but not because it fixed anything. He waited. I cried because it's the first time I've ever seen her bleed a little. We sat in silence. Then I stood, walked over to my desk and pulled out my own stationery. I didn't need to write a long response, just enough. Mum, I'm glad you told me the truth. That took strength. And I see you now, maybe for the first time. I forgive you. But I don't forget, and I can't go back to pretending everything is fine. From now on, I will love you, but I will love myself more. I will protect my boundaries. I will protect my time. I will protect my peace. I hope we can build something new, but only if it honours both of us. Claire. I sealed the envelope, placed a stamp in the corner and walked it to the mailbox. As I slipped it in, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not everything had healed, but something had shifted, and for now that was enough. 6 months later, the sun shone down on a quiet, ivy-covered inn tucked into the hills just outside the city. The kind of place where time felt slower, where birdsong replaced traffic, and the breeze smelled like blooming lavender and old wood. It was our wedding day. Daniel and I had chosen to keep it small, intimate. Just the people who truly knew us, who had earned the right to witness our beginning. There were no grand ballrooms, no ornate ice sculptures, no flashy centerpieces. Just simple white chairs, wildflowers in glass jars, and a violinist softly playing in the background. I stood behind a set of double doors, watching guests arrive through the glass. My heart pounded, not from nerves, but from something else. A quiet certainty. The kind I had never felt growing up. Grandma Ruth arrived first, in a lavender dress with a matching hat, walking tall beside her cane. When she saw me peeking through the doors, she winked. Daniel's parents came next, beaming, arms linked, holding a small box wrapped in navy paper. Then came Greg and Alison. They didn't come together, of course. Greg arrived with his wife and 2 sons, Alison solo, but confidently dressed in an emerald green pantsuit. They grey glance when they saw each other, then nodded. Nothing more, not warm, but not cold. They had RSVP'd without drama. I hadn't asked them to speak. I hadn't expected them to do anything but show up, and that's exactly what they did. Then, just as the last song faded and the officiant gave the signal, she arrived, my mother, wearing pale grey. She didn't wear a corsage. She didn't bring a gift. She came alone, took a seat in the very last row, and folded her hands in her lap. She didn't look angry. She looked quiet. I didn't focus on her long. Today wasn't about her. The doors opened. The violinist began playing, and my father, standing beside me in a charcoal suit and tear-brimmed eyes, whispered, "Ready?" I nodded. He held out his arm. I took it, and we walked. As I stepped down the aisle, I didn't search the crowd for approval. I didn't scan for who was clapping loudest or who had the brightest smile. I looked ahead at Daniel, waiting, steady. Ours was not a perfect love story. We hadn't met in some movie-worthy moment. We'd met at a friend's game night. We'd bonded over trivia questions and a shared hatred of pineapple on pizza. But what we built was real, layered, earned. And today I wasn't just walking toward him. I was walking away from a lifetime of trying to earn love. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. There were no long readings or elaborate vows, just us, speaking honestly, promising to protect what we'd found in each other. When the officiant pronounced us married, the crowd clapped softly, respectfully. No fanfare, just warmth. At the reception, people mingled under string lights and laughed over glasses of Prosecco. My best friend toasted us with a story about Daniel's awkward first attempt at flirting. Grandma Ruth gave a short speech, "May you love loudly and forgive softly," and sat down before anyone could cry too hard. Greg approached me once during the cake cutting. "You look good, Claire," he said. "Thanks," I replied. He hesitated. "I meant it, about repaying the loan." "I know," I said. He nodded and walked away. Alison didn't speak to me, but when she left, she squeezed my arm briefly. That was her version of connection, I supposed, and I accepted it. As the evening faded into dusk, I saw my mother rise from her chair and begin walking toward me. I didn't panic. I didn't brace. She stopped a few feet away and said, "You planned a beautiful day." "Thank you," I replied. A beat passed. "I'm glad I was here," she added. "So am I." She looked down at her hands, then back at me. "I don't expect anything to be fixed." Neither do I. We stood in that honest silence, the kind that didn't ask for anything. Then she nodded and walked away. She hadn't tried to make a speech. She hadn't overstepped. She had simply shown up and maybe for the first time stayed in her lane. As the last guests drifted off and the lights began to dim, I stood barefoot on the grass, watching Daniel help pack up the remaining food and flowers. He caught me staring. "What?" he asked. I shook my head, smiling. "Nothing. Just this. All of this. It's enough." And I meant it, because the girl who once begged to be seen had finally learned how to see herself. As the evening faded into twilight and the air turned cooler, Daniel took my hand and led me to the dance floor under a canopy of lights. Our first dance was quiet, no grand choreography, no rehearsed steps, just us, swaying gently to the soft chords of a cello. I could feel the eyes of those who mattered watching us, not judging, not weighing, just witnessing. When the song ended, Daniel kissed my temple and whispered, "Stay here. There's one more surprise." I laughed, but he was already slipping away, motioning towards the small platform near the edge of the courtyard. Grandma Ruth slowly made her way up the steps, leaning on her cane. Someone handed her a microphone. The crowd hushed instantly. She didn't need to clear her throat or announce herself. Everyone listened when Ruth Harper spoke. "I won't keep you long," she began, voice clear despite her age. "I've seen a lot of things in my 84 years. I've seen love wrapped in silence. I've seen strength mistaken for stubbornness. I've seen daughters go unseen in their own homes." Her eyes scanned the small crowd, then landed gently on me. "But what I haven't seen until today," she continued, "is someone brave enough to love people who didn't always know how to love her back." A breath caught in my throat. "Claire," she said, her voice thickening slightly, "you are the only one I've ever seen love this family fully, even while being pushed to the edges of it." The courtyard was still. All the years of invisibility, all the whispers I'd swallowed, felt like they were dissolving in her words. You loved us even when we didn't know how to return it. And that, she paused, is the kind of love that doesn't come from needing approval. It comes from knowing your worth. There were tears now in more than one corner of the courtyard. Even Greg was blinking hard, his wife squeezing his hand. Ruth nodded once, handed the microphone back, and returned to her seat without flourish. It was the most powerful speech I'd ever heard, and it had lasted less than 2 minutes. I felt someone step beside me. It was my mother. She wasn't crying, but her face was softer than I'd ever seen it. She leaned in close, and for the first time since I was a child, her voice trembled. Not with anger, not with judgment, but with something close to surrender. I'm proud of you, she said. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, it was just between us. I looked at her, I believed her, and I smiled. But I didn't cry, because I didn't need it. I wasn't waiting anymore, not for her words, not for her approval, not for her love. I had already chosen myself. The next morning, I woke up beside Daniel in a sunlit room filled with flowers and half-unpacked boxes of wedding gifts. My hair was still pinned up, and I hadn't taken off my earrings. I felt messy and beautiful and entirely mine. We sat on the back porch, sipping coffee, wrapped in a shared blanket, the birds singing louder than any memory I carried. Daniel looked at me and said, "What are you thinking?" I smiled. That I spent 38 years trying to get one sentence out of my mother. And when I finally heard it, I realized I didn't need it anymore. He didn't say anything. He just kissed my shoulder and held me tighter. We didn't make plans that day. We didn't talk about family politics or unresolved issues or awkward dynamics that might come later. We just existed, free and full and enough. That afternoon I took the wedding photos out of their packaging. I framed the one where I stood beside Grandma Ruth, both of us laughing so hard our eyes were closed. I hung it in our hallway. Not a single photo of my mother made the wall. Not out of spite, just honesty. Love, real love, isn't about obligation, it's about choice. And I had finally chosen me.